Hi, thanks for joining us this evening here again in this lovely theatre in Bath. Thanks to Komedia Bath for putting this event on, and also DW Drums as well. So wherever you are in the world, grab a chair, sit yourself down, get a drink and relax for the next hour and a half or so, maybe shorter, maybe longer, we'll see. Depends on your questions, actually. We're going to be talking about something different this time. So the people who joined last time, thank you ever so much for joining. We had some lovely questions and comments, and my Facebook went nuts for about 3 weeks afterwards, thanks to all the streaming from Komedia, YouTube, Instagram, all the other places. It went absolutely crazy. So hopefully you guys are coming back again tonight. And if you are coming back and you want to ask me some questions, or if it's the first time you've come in, you're still welcome to ask questions. I believe we're putting it under the hashtag #AskRob. Is that right, Luke? Let me just run that past you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Get them in nice and early.
Get them in nice and early. Stack them high for Christmas. Fantastic. So I thought I'd play a little bit there and mess about with the sound of the drum kit. Because if you've checked out on my Masterclass page, you will see that that's what we're doing today. And the thing is, okay, I have this drum kit here and these cymbals, and you know, it's of a certain quality, and that's great. But you know, I could equally do something that I'm going to do today on a drum kit that, you know, is sort of 4 times, you know, the price down the other end of the bracket, you know, the cheaper end of the bracket. And the thing is, it's all about sound. It's about character. It's about getting sound from your drums, no matter what kit you've got. Okay, so I'm going to be doing some weird stuff over this next maybe 45 minutes or so to this drum kit to change it from how we heard it at the start to how it started to sound a quarter of the way through, halfway through the performance, and then come back in again at the very end of the performance with the various O-rings and various things taken off to go back to a more live sound. Now, for people who have followed my drumming, you know I do a lot of work in the recording studio with some very wonderful producers, and they sometimes ask you for some pretty interesting things. So, I mean, we could spend hours on this. So what I'm going to focus on mostly is the snare drum and the hi-hat. I will talk about the bass drum, and I'll look at the toms and the cymbals, and we'll sort of do a few little things to change things up and experiment. And some of it will be done in real time here and now. Okay, so I'll be changing some cymbals up to make some stacks and stuff to see what we can get. So that's what this is all about. And you probably noticed the snare drum I had tuned at the moment very open. And when I played it at the start on the solo, it was kind of as you would expect to hear it. What we call in the trade, wide open. You know, almost makes you want to play something like the Gene Krupa. Type thing. And this sound can work for a lot of different things. You know, when you're playing a groove, it gives you a certain kind of texture to the sound. But the thing is, it's a little bit lively, so we'd probably have to put something on it to tame it down a little bit. And I'm a big fan, and I'm not an endorser or anything, but I'm a big fan of the Moon Gel. People that comment on my Facebook say, how much Moon Gel on your drums? But of course, they don't know what track I'm playing and how much I need. So from this first to this one piece, all of a sudden, the rest of that ring is gone. The sound is focused. We can hear that in the room. That means the microphone can definitely pick that up. Now, I'm going to use one track for all of these different ways that I'm going to change up these sounds and experiment. You know, in a perfect world, we could use loads. We could use some country music for this sort of sound. We could use drum and bass. We could keep changing up. Of course, we don't have that luxury. So it's a track that we're only hearing the bare bones of it. There's a female vocal line. There's a rhythm guitar part to this. You know, and I guess if you were going to put it into sort of any kind of realm, it's kind of a bit acid jazzy, but with more of a maybe a 07 synth type vibe. And I'm just going to play a little bit of it now. So we're going to hear it quite a few times tonight. So you're going to get very used to it. Every time we look at it, we're going to have the bass and the hi-hat and the snare just changing up the sounds a little bit. Just so each time you hear it, you can see, oh my goodness, that's how it changes the feel of the track. So we've got this snare, which is 14x7 DW Collector's Edition, tuned quite high, as you've already heard, with one piece of moon gel. The hi-hats are just a pair of 14 Vulcan Legends, and it's a 22-inch bass drum. Pretty standard sizes, nothing too wacky as yet. So I'm going to press play and play it in a manner that you could play it with these sounds. Okay, we're getting the idea. Very lively drum sound. All these drums, as I say, are wide, wide open. Now, let's say in this circumstance, we want the drum kit to suddenly sound like it's a bit tighter, more reined in, maybe with a bit of compression, you know, like dragging the sound in a bit. Still big, but kind of bringing it in. So instantly, and if you could do this on wedding gigs, guys, you can do this anywhere. It is a wonderful thing. There's an invention out there called the Big Fat Snare Head, which I know everyone is raving about, and it's fantastic, and it really is. I kind of do something, and I recommend I do have one, but I also like to go a bit rogue, and I get my own heads and I cut them up. So I've got some coated heads. Anyone who's been to my clinics has seen me do this. I'll say, he does do this. I've got loads of them in my drum cases. Clear heads, some really thin, some a bit heavier, and I've got another white one here, and I have random ones dotted all over the place. But if I just play this snare one more time, if I just put this one white head on, so we got this, place this on here, all of a sudden it brings the sound right in. So we get a very different feel. If I add one more, the clear one, the pitch has gone right down. Okay, cool. Now, I'm not going to play the whole track. I'm just going to play a little bit, just so you can hear me play the same groove. I won't play any of the toms, because they're still lively. Actually, I will. Let's see if that's going to work. See how that's going to fit as a temperature for the whole character of the drum set. So just even with that little snippet there, you can hear how much depth that's suddenly got. Now, in character, this is what we're talking, building a character of a kit, a different sound. The track's the same, but it's starting to feel a little bit different. We need to look at the hi-hats. These are lovely hi-hats, 14-inch Legend hats, fantastic. And I like to sort of combine tops and bottoms of hats, actually. So on this one, I've got a 14 Legend, and the bottom is a Dark Master. So they're slightly different ranges as well, which I think really helps give us a different sound. So we can almost say this snare we've got now is a bit more electronic. And those hi-hats are still sounding a bit nice. We need to sort of make them sound a little bit rougher. So the lovely people at Vulcan made this fantastic hi-hat, 14-inch top hat, with some jingles on there. And this is instantly going to change the sound of what the hi-hat's going to do. It's always subjective, of course, these things, you know. What you think might be good is maybe not what the engineer or the artist or the producer thinks is the right sound. But it's good to have these things to try out. So you could put a jingle ring. I've got some of those here, which I'll be pulling out later. You can put those on the hi-hat, and it'll do the same sort of job. They're in here somewhere tucked away with everything else. So they'll do a similar job, but this is a different sound. I'm going to go straight into the track. I'm not even going to let you hear it before we play it. He says. So, really different sound. It's very, you know, it's a Marmite sound, I think you'll find here. And to take that idea even further, on this side of the drum set, now this is something I experimented with earlier. Now we've got, it's one I prepared earlier. This is a lovely remote hi-hat, which is always a bit of a weird thing to play. But on this side, I have a 20-inch ride cymbal, vintage 50s ride, as my bottom hat. And on the top, I think you guys can see that, I've got my Swiss cheese Vulcan effects, which has got a really, really industrial sound. We thought this was harsh. Check this one. So now I've got two options, and you can do this with any standard size of crash and stuff. And I'm actually going to change these up now. The last time I'm going to change these up. And I'm going to play the track again with a different combination. 17-inch crash on the bottom, which is an antique, a Vulcan antique. And on the top, I am going to use a 16-inch Vulcan Etna crash. And at this juncture, as I'm swapping over clutches, I'd just like to ask Luke, are there any questions out there as yet? Do we have some interaction with our audience?
No questions as of yet, so get them in now. But we have a few people saying hello. Clive says hello.
Clive?
Yep.
Oh, Clive.
Classic Clive.
Yep.
Jonas says he's enjoying from France.
Lovely.
So it's nice, bit of international reach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, we're all in lockdown, guys, so this is a brilliant time to get down the shed or in the garage, wherever you keep your drums, and just experiment, you know, because all these things are done through experimentation. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, that I've used every one of these things that I'm going to show you tonight in a session or at a gig or a rehearsal. They've all been used. Some have been laughed at, you know, like this idea. But I've used this on an Australian singer-songwriter friend of mine, a guy called Pat Nicholson. I did an album with him. Well, I was still working on it. At the first lockdown, we started it, and we're still doing it. And I used these hats on the track. So let's, again, I'll just play the song, a few bars, just to feel what this temperature is like. And see how these bigger hi-hats now will sit a bit more with the snare drum. And remember, we haven't even started detuning this snare drum yet. We've just put these pads on there. That's all we've done. I'll tell you what, I'm going to put one more on, just for luck. Lovely. Okay, let's go again. Okay, so here in the room, we're getting very much a kind of detuned Lindrum sound, which I used on a track with the amazing 80s band. I say 80s band, they're still going, but that's when they were absolutely huge. Simple Minds. I did a 2-week session with them that produced the single Broken Glass Park. And the 12-inch version is my version, because I know Mel did some versions as well. And I use this kind of sound with that, which is extremely Lindrum. And I've actually got a Lindrum 2 here. Now, I know some drum purists will be going, back with your Lindrum. But this thing I'm going to use later, and it's actually taught me a lot about placement and, and phrasing and all sorts, but we'll get into that in a minute. Now, we've got a feeling everyone's happy with the sound. The bass drum, as I say, there's a few things I do with the bass drum. Let me just get into that right now a second. I sometimes put this 16-inch crash, which is now a hi-hat, just resting on the front head. So if that's my front head, I just sit it with the bell facing out on my bass drum head, and when I play, it comes forward and makes a kind of very metallic kind of sound, and it's really cool. And I wanted to do it today, but Luke told me off and said I can't because his microphone is going in the bass drum. But it's something you could try, and it works with jazz bass drums, any size of bass drum. As long as you've got a head on the front, it's absolutely fine because it's got something to vibrate against. But that's quite a cool little thing. And while we're on the subject, because bass drums, they need a bit more love, I think, from the manufacturers and people. And something I have done is, I know Joe will get this for you on the foot cam. I've taken just a very basic, cheap end of the market LP tambourine, and I've put it down between where the beater sits, here, it just sits there, and then this one, which is a hi-hat LP one, to its left. Like so. So we get the jingle as well as the jangle, as well as the bass drum. So. I'll also try that without such a heavy. Because remember, man, I'll tell you, this always freaks me out when I do that. Say you're doing a wedding gig. One track is, you know, maybe you're doing James Brown Cold Sweat or something, and you need a very sort of sparkly snare sound, and the next thing you're doing is a rock track. Just literally 2 of these bad boys, and you're in business. Anyway, I'll start getting excited by this stuff, and I'll just play. So now we've got a brighter snare sound. Maybe play a Motown thing or something with that bass drum sound.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, Luke.
Out of interest,
Yes.
how would that sound if you put something to fatten up the snare drum and played it like a dance beat?
Ha ha ha.
I'd love to hear that.
All right, you got it, my man. Here we
That's
go.
not too on the spot.
No. You know I love this sound, dude. I'm always going to go back to this sound, this Lindrum sound. Do you want it deeper, or?
Yeah, go on then.
I'll add one more, and then I'll start detuning in a second, actually. It's got a roar. So what sort of, like a drum and bassy thing, or what are you looking for?
Yeah, maybe like 4 on the floor, like.
Let's do that. Nice.
I think that works.
I mean, you know, with this lovely Porter and Davies still, I can feel all of that coming through. It's great. And it's just a little nuance to have behind the band. You wouldn't necessarily want it on every song. That's probably not a good thing. But it doesn't take 2 seconds to go down like this, take these back off, and you're back to your normal sound. And all of a sudden, your band leader or someone's gone, hey, that's really cool, you know. There's a tambourine on that track, and you haven't got enough hands or feet, but that's a way to do it. You know, it's just invention. It's just creating stuff, you know. You feel you have to do it. All right, very good. So that's what we could do with the bass drum. We could obviously detune it. You know, in the studio, we could take the front head off to get more of a 70s kind of pop sound, get the mic nearer in. Sounds like Vera Lynn. And then put the bass drum pillow further to the bass drum, this head, obviously, because that's the only head that's on the drum. Maybe change the heads up a little bit. But, you know, this thing's all about doing it on the fly, having some fun, just thinking, right, I need to do this now. So what I'm going to do next is just, because I know I'll miss it if I don't do it. Let's say we're happy with this track. You know, we've heard it a few times now. The hi-hats are good. The snare's good. We're happy with the bass drum. But the toms are still sounding a bit, you know, like a bit lively. You know, sitting quite where they should. So I'm going to start changing those up with these this lovely invention we've got here. So the 12-inch without, 12-inch with. Again, just centers the sound completely. 14-inch without anything at all. Lively. Put one of these on, transparent. Brings it right in. Actually makes it deeper, obviously. And then to tote clean the sound up completely. And also, now we've got these on there, you know, it's kind of harder to get the doubles and stuff. I mean, we can practice. All good practice. But it makes you play differently. I said earlier, you know, I touched on that when you change the sound up, you no longer want to do certain things. Like, you may have noticed I was playing a lot of grace notes when the snare was open, and then when it was slightly closed down, I was still playing a few grace notes on the snare. But when I play it through this time, with this tom sound, which again feels a bit more machine-like, it's more focused, I won't want to do the grace notes because this sound is taking up a lovely space on the track. And of course, you can go back into the control room and you can hear that sound, and your ego goes completely thinking, you know, you could be doing, oh, I could be going, you know, all that jazz. When the sound is this good and the track's happening, you don't need anything else. So I'm going to play a bit more. We'll listen to those toms. And what I'll do is I'm going to keep that one open, because that's almost got an electronic kind of feel to it anyway. So let's see what this temperature sounds like with this character. So already they're much fatter. And if we had to change things up slightly, you know, I could maybe put a bit of moon gel just to close that down. Yeah. Now, if I wanted to go even further with this snare drum, you know, we could take it higher, we could take it brighter. If we wanted it to sound a bit more like maybe, you know, a brass or a metal shell, it's kind of hard to do, but if we wanted that, we would take some dampening off so the drum begins to sing again. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go just to tune it down a wee little bit here. So I'm just going a little bit on all, or most of the pegs. It's not like a fine science. Still too bright. Take it down a bit more. Now, obviously, I've had people say, yeah, but at gigs, I can't change the hi-hats up. You know, you might have to think about how you're phrasing on the hats, whether you play the shaft of the stick on the side, or whether you're playing on the tip of the stick, you know, how wet the hi-hats are, you know, half open, half closed, all the grades in between. So you haven't got time to do that. But snare drum, you certainly have got time to quickly change these things up with these heads. If you want to use O-rings, they're cool, but I find it doesn't quite give me the sound that I want. So we're going a bit further down. Oh. Right down. Can't go much lower. The snare is in the pits of hell right now. Okay. Yeah, cool. Okay, so we now got this sort of snare sound from Hill. She's very, very deep. Hi-hats are still matching. Let's try that along with this track. Just give us a sound of what that's going to sound like with the temperature of this song. Okay, so this is a sound we've got. It's got a character. It's very different to what we had before. If I take the pads off the snare, just to see what this is going to sound like, it's probably not going to be anyone's best friend right now. Not too bad. Again, maybe with a bit of moon gel, we could just tame that down a little bit, just maybe take an edge off. Yeah, it might need a bit of a tweak here and there, you know? But instantly, on this snare drum, I've got kind of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different sounds. And while I've got this Linn drum here a second, I think it's well worth, let me just see if I can get the sound of what I'm trying to mimic. It's not going to be quite the same, but as much as we can without messing too much with EQs on the mic and cheating and stuff like that. So, where are we? Can people at home hear that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right, so that's what we're talking about, that kind of... Of course, we can't go quite that low, but... Actually, while I'm here, let's just do a little experiment with the old Linn 2. I'll just fire her up, literally, because it takes a while to get this thing started. Let's start her off with, what have we got? Let's say this pattern. Instant 80s. Here we go. done. And I'll probably use a little bit of this tomfoolery a bit later. But the wonderful thing about this machine, I was talking about it earlier. I mean, I was rehearsing with it midweek with Luke. Luke had never seen one before because he's a wee bit younger than myself. And it took a while for her to warm up. It would come on, it would turn itself off. But eventually, she stayed on. Analog equipment, it has to warm up. And it was brilliant. And what I learned about this, and I talked about this on the DW playlist party, was that you can actually think of, like I've said before on my drum clinics and masterclasses about sound. You know, and I know Pete Cater says a similar thing. You imagine, a bit like Darth Vader, he's got that kind of box on his chest. You imagine there's faders on there, you know, and one of them's your bass drum, one of them's your snare, and so on. And you can change that. And on here, you can actually do that. You know, each fader is a different part of the kit. So you can bring down the hi-hat to see how a groove would sound without it. Then you can bring it back in. You think, what does it sound like without the bass drum even, maybe? Let's take the bass drum out. And then you can program, you know, reasonably complex parts like I did there. And you can see how all the rhythms tie together and what's important. So that kind of influenced me in lots of different ways. When I was playing this pattern earlier, this one, I'm kind of seeing, you know, myself as the drum machine. So I'm trying to play a part. If I just put this back up again and play this for you, I'm imagining I am this machine doing all of these parts. Hopefully in time. So, you know, at a very young age, I was trying to think, how can I do that with just 2 arms? And that's kind of, you know, a different way of making you think about how to make music. And of course, we know that through the 80s into the 90s, drummers, and certainly beyond that with drum and bass, we had to play stuff that was being programmed. And of course, hence why I was playing some drum and bassy things with this sound as well. And also the hi-hats sound good in that world. And we could start to build kind of stacks and stuff, you know, and experiment a little bit. I'm going to do just that. We've not done this one. And I'm sure both Luke and Davies who are in the audience are going to go, we never tried that. But let's have a go at this. Let's just move this across slightly.
While you're doing that...
Yeah, absolutely.
It might be worth explaining for those under, let's say, 20s,
yep,
what the machine to your left actually is.
Okay, yeah, I probably did brush over that a little quick. Roger Lynn invented the first proper usable drum machine, sort of late 70s or mid 70s, the Lynn 1, which is really rare to find. And it was actual samples from real drum kits. And you have these little EEPROMs, you open it up, and there's these little EEPROMs that sit, and each EEPROM is a sound from, I think it was a Yamaha kit. And he made, this one isn't as tunable, but he made the first one tunable, so everything, the cabaza, the cowbell, could make a different sound. Hence why certain people from that era, like Prince, was really good at using it, because each sound has its own output. So you could have some of the sounds dry, and then some of the sounds heavily gated. You know, when you hear things like When Doves Cry, and 1999, and various out, there's many, you know, countless, where various sounds will be dry, and then he'll be putting other effects or delays. And eventually the drum machine became an instrument for people like that. But in the 80s, it basically became just a boom, ka, which is a shame, because there's a lot of people like him that were using it as a musical instrument. And then this one came out about 1985, and superseded it. And I've got 2 of these, well, I did have, because they're always going wrong. But this one, touch wood, hopefully won't anytime soon. But yeah, and they're just great to work with. And they're in sort of, it's analog, so the tempo, as you saw there where I was moving it, it's really kind of drastic. A little move will slow it down or speed it up. And you can MIDI it up, but I've never MIDI'd this one up. I've always kept it just as is, because the number on this is reasonably low. So it's been repaired a fair few times, but she's a great machine. And I've used it in all different styles of music, not just like dance music. So yeah, they're a great thing. If you find one, they're a bit of a curiosity now, but they're cool little instruments. And of course, that goes along with 808s, 909s. But of course, they're so machine-like that it's harder to produce those sounds on an acoustic drum kit. That's not quite as easy. But yeah, does that fill you in on that one, my man?
Absolutely.
Right. Now
I'll let you actually put on your cymbal stack.
Well, I'm still holding one. I didn't quite do it. So this is an experiment. So what we've got part of a Vulcan cymbal stack, which these are as well, which I've broken out as little splashes. And I've got a 22-inch ride with that on there. So instantly, we've got kind of a bit of a sizzle cymbal. So I'm going to just quickly, with this tuning being what it is, that's okay, play maybe a jazzy thing to see what this sounds like. Experimentation. And also, happy accident, I've just grabbed a fist load of those, I didn't know what they were, plus a little bit of moon gel on the top, or a big stack of moon gel, and I suddenly got this sound. I think that's maybe one more. So even drier again, you know, this is like, I'm the eternal student with this as well, you know, so constantly changing that up. Right. So, yes, mate.
What you just said relates to a couple of questions that we've had in. I wonder if I can sneak them in now.
Sneak them in.
So, Mooncat Drums asked, I've tried cutting out old heads, but they always seem to curl up like old magic fish. Is there a secret to keeping them flat?
Well, there's a time and a place for that. Place? Fish? No? Okay. Oh, cod. Anyway, let's not do the gags. I'm here to play drums. Well, you know, I mean, you could see how I've butchered these, or maybe you can't. They're not even properly round. They look like sort of various cloud shapes and stuff. I just attack them with a penknife or something to get it started, and then even something as you know, bad as, you know, crude as scissors to get around it. I was doing it today, actually. Because somebody said, what are you doing? I said, I'm just cutting up one of these, like really badly. Because I just find they don't curl up. I've never had that. So, I've had one that did that. I apologise. I had one. But mine don't seem to do it. Maybe you need to go further inside, away from the rim, maybe. So it's, you know, not quite so where it's...
Well, what I was hinting at is perhaps you could use moon gel to weigh it down.
You could use moon gel. You know, usually they stay there, but sometimes they can be a bit bouncy. They do pop up sometimes. But they're not today, you know. Sometimes they do. Sometimes I do clinics and they pop up and you think, oh, blimey, why is that today? There's like a little vacuum underneath it or something, you know, an air pocket. So sometimes just a few of these round there, just the side of the head will work. But I kind of don't like it to go over the whole head, because like an O-ring or something, or a head that fits perfectly, because I say none of these do. They're all slightly off. I mean, look at that. That's terrible. But I like that because it means I can put some moon gel on it, get my hand underneath it quickly to pull it back out again. It's not always possible to do that. So maybe just cut out some more heads and be a bit more kind of arty with them, see what you can come up with.
And one more very quick question.
Yep.
Richard Powell asks, do you ever use moon gels on your cymbals?
Yes, I do. I do use moon gel on my cymbals. And I was just sort of going to get to that, actually. It's a nice one. You sort of preempted that. I do. I don't like to do it too often. And I think last time I was here doing one of these, I was talking about Cympad, because people always laugh at me and say, you're endorsed by a cymbal folk company. But without going into it at great length, you should check out the Chromatics, because they're absolutely fantastic. And they've also got some other ones which is much, much bigger, same kind of foam that they use, which cymbals just sing when they're sat on them. If you check out the website, they'll tell you the science of it. And what these bigger ones do is they sit underneath and they hold the bell a little bit more. So these ones are sort of, you can see these are the average size here. Unfortunately, I haven't got any of the bigger ones with me. They're over there. They're not on the stage. But so it's just the standard sort of size. The what, sorry?
I could pass you one.
You could do if you want, but you'd have to read through my bags.
I'll,
You'd have to read through my bags, I'm afraid. They're there. But yeah, they're like this, but they're slightly bigger. And they sit underneath the bell of the cymbal, and they just cup it. So it means you don't get as many overtones. And of course, you could put the similar size on the top as well. But I quite like, a lot of people, I've not done it today, apart from this, because I want to get cymbals on quickly. But sometimes I don't have any clamp or top felt on my cymbal when I'm recording sometimes. I'll leave them wide open. And sometimes at various gigs, I'll leave them wide open as well. I can't tell you for why. It's just sometimes I feel like I want them to breathe a little bit more. So if you check out the chromatics, the Cympad is good. I don't like using tape or anything like that on the cymbals, because I really find that just sort of kills the sound. Oh, you got them?
Oh, that was terrible.
That wasn't a very good throw. So if you could see that, like a flying saucer. But yeah, that's what I do. Anyway, Richard, that's... but yeah, Moon Gel works really, really well. Takes the edge off. But also, if we're on the... Oh, they're coming. Thank you, Luke. Thank you for that. They're like this. So they're much bigger. And they sit underneath, and they do different sizes. They get bigger ones than this. I use the really big ones. If you're ever doing a jazz gig, and I love this as my jazz ride with some light Bopworks sticks. That's not going to put anyone off their pasta, particularly. But even if that's a bit much, just put one of these underneath, and it just stops the whole thing. And if you want to be really over the top, one on the top as well, but really, they're for underneath. So check them out, because they are really good. And they feel great as well. It's like one of those kind of stress ball things. Cool. All right, so any more questions while we're here before we talk about a little bit of the cymbals?
I'm a bit out of breath now. We have a few questions coming in.
Okay. You're laughing, oh dear.
Just the little drum fill there.
Oh, thank you.
Clive Stocker asks, how do these experiments work when you're recording? Do producers welcome them?
They do. The Simple Minds snare sound, I kind of stumbled across with Steve Osborne at the time. And I kept it in the locker, and let's face it, as I said earlier, these aren't very hard to keep in your locker, in your snare case. And I took it to and I always have them. In every time I pull a gig out, pull the drums out at a gig, they're always there, or a session. And I did an album with an Italian singer called Pausini, which actually won the Latin Grammy that year. And Rick Simpson, amazing producer, was on that session. And I was using this very kit, but this is 8. I've put an 8 up here today, 8, 12, 16, 14. But I had 10, 12, 14, 16, this snare drum, array of cymbals, what have you. And we got a great drum sound. It sounded fantastic. And I took 3 or 4 other snares with me, as you do. But I wanted to keep this one on because we kind of liked, again, how the character was sitting in the song. It was pitched right, and we'll talk about pitch in a second, very briefly, because I know time's getting on. You can always ask questions and email me, and I can answer them at a later date.
I was going to say, if people put in their questions, we will answer them
absolutely
after the fact. We'll be looking through the comments on these videos.
We will. We'll be traipsing through them. So.
Exactly. And these videos will stay online as well. Either through your page, which is probably the easiest place to find them, and Komedia and DW
and
as well.
DW. So he said, great sound, great sound. I was hearing through the headphones. And then I thought, hang on, I'll just pull these out. And I put them on the head, and all of a sudden, as you heard, we have ba, ba, and then oosh, oosh. And he came running down. It was at Riverside Studios, owned by Seb Pachia. Anyway, Rick came running into the room saying, what the hell was that? I need to sample that. I just showed him what it was. And he was like, my God. And he said, what do you call it? I said, well, it's the snare drum of doom, or the douche snare drum. He said, I'm having that. And it blew him away. So yes, other times you'll sort of run through and say, hey guys, I've got an idea. How about this? And nah, it's okay. We kind of like the character where it is. And again, you go, okay, that's fine. But if you don't know how to do that in the first place, then you're not trying to experiment with the sound, because we know playing is everything. Technique, we need all those kind of things, and feel. We'll talk about those in other masterclasses, of course. But we're talking about sound, and sound's really important. So once you've laid a groove down that sounds like that, you know, if you can't play a single strut roll with one hand, who cares? Because that artist is happy, and it went on to win a Grammy and multi-million selling record, you know. So it's a good thing to try. So this is all about experimenting and trying it, but only if, you know, it's going to fit the material that you're working on. And I know we probably need to pull it in soon, Luke. Is that what that sign is?
Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay. So again, we need longer, don't we, on this? But with the snare drum, you know, we'll take the pitch up and down, but sometimes you'll find that the producer will ask you to tune to the track, you know, and you might think, I've never heard of that. My snare is my snare sound, it's a Black Beauty or it's a whatever. It's great as it is. You know, not necessarily when you're working with, you know, professional people as a freelance musician like me. I go in as an open book. So, like I said with Rick Simpson, not quite the right sound, Rob, but it's good, it'll work, it's great. Tried a few things out, he was blown away. So, when someone says tune to the track, again, you can't do this live, but in the studio, there could be a frequency that just messes with the vocal a little bit or with the guitar line, and you might have to tune down a bit or tune up a bit, but again, let your ego go and just think, that's fine, you know, that's totally cool. I can do that for this track. The track is what's important. So we talked a little bit about the toms. Finally, we're going to look at the cymbals. We could talk about dampening the cymbals. We can add things to the cymbals for a bit of fun. You know, we can add things like this is actually my son's tambourine, onto a flat ride. Get that extra little jingle. Gives it a nice sustain, and also a thing I've done a few times, and it usually pings off, but is to have again, just adds a different sound to the drum kit. My King rings, I can't find them. They're in here somewhere. But another thing I wanted to talk about, you might wonder where I've got, probably one of the last things I'll talk about, knives and forks. Yes. Now, I did, actually, Clive Stocker, who wrote in earlier, conducted the choir for this. A good friend of mine, Ted Benham, percussionist and drummer, wrote a piece of music called The Enclosure Acts a few years ago. Here we go. And one of the pieces he'd written just didn't suit sticks or brushes or anything, so we ended up using knives and forks. And I'm not going to sort of recreate that for you now, because it was in 7 and then it was in 4. It was a bit of a maths lesson, and to be honest with you, I can't remember quite how it went. But what I'm going to show you, when I have used this before, again, it makes people think, you're mad, Rob, you're mad. But the triangle, what a beautiful thing. Using my wife's forks. Sorry about that, Helen. But anyway, so we've got this. So I did a pattern that sounded, well, it didn't sound, it was exactly this. This now becomes my hi-hat. What I might have played here and of course you notice I'm playing the bass drum a lot lighter. You can see I'm playing it, I'm not laying into it, because again, you play for the temperature of the bits that you're looking at. There's no point in hitting your bass drum really hard with the triangle, it's just not going to work. You need the triangle to sing. I'm touring with Loreena McKennitt, which I was before lockdown, I wouldn't quite use knives or forks, but there's sections where I quickly go over to a triangle that's here, and I'll play it with a stick or something, because again, that's kind of a different sound, not ideal, but you know, a different timbre. It's a slightly different thing. So I'm into trying these ideas live. So anyone see me with Loreena, you'd know I'm moving from darabukas to my hands on the drums, brushes, and so on and so forth, and experimenting with anything that I can, and actually taking it to the stage with her wonderful, wonderful music. So there could be one more thing I could do, but let me just check with Luke to see how we're doing for time and for questions and so on.
Well, we're running over a bit now. We've got 2 more questions.
Okay.
So I'm thinking, can we get those 2 questions in and then you play us out with the Lindrum?
You've absolutely got that, my man.
That sounds great. So, our last couple of questions.
Yeah.
We have a question from Joe, and he says that he noticed that at some points you were playing with the stick in your left hand backwards.
Yeah.
Does that make a difference to the sound?
Makes a huge difference to the sound. And I also did that on the hats as well. I was doing it on the hi-hats because every time, you know, and different size of stick. At one point, because obviously one went north at one point, different size of stick will make a big difference to the hi-hat sound. So the tip here on this one, or with the shaft of the butt end of the stick, much heavier. Again, different size stick completely, heavier sound. So if I'm playing light hi-hat, heavy stick, other way around, you can just hear that's got the drive and the sort of chest that says, you know, these 2 things balance up together. That's why I was playing round the other way. And same with the snare drum as well. It just makes you feel differently about how you play. It gives you a bit more. And same with the toms. And the cymbals. You know, I wouldn't necessarily do a jazz gig this way, obviously, but you try things out. And as I said, every sound difference makes you feel different and makes you play differently. Less grace notes, harder, you know, more intent with the side of the stick. You know, all that is going to transfer through the microphones and get people up in the, you know, the control room dancing and going, that's wicked, you know, that's amazing. That sounds great. Or if it's a chilled thing, that's beautiful. The space in this is great. You know, whatever you're trying to create. And as I say, it's not about licks. This isn't about speed. This is about taste, you know, and your own experimentation and creativity being let loose. Remember, someone can only say no. They're not going to sack you. They're going to go, that's cool, we'll save that for another song. It's not for this one for now. But let's use it in another one. Great idea. Brilliant.
I think that's a real key point there. What you just said, there is no wrong answer.
Exactly.
When it comes to this stuff, just experiment.
Because I know some people, when I do these things, as I say, they go, what? You know, even on wedding gigs, they go, no, just keep your sound. Don't just keep your regular sound. You know, because we all do those sort of corporate gigs, you know, to make some money when we're not touring. And I've learned so much by doing those gigs, but that's a whole nother story. Maybe we could have an industry chat one day and talk about life in the business, you know, from all different kinds of levels and spectrums, you know.
Sounds like a nice idea.
Yeah, definitely.
So for our last question, this question comes from Matthew Green. He says, evening, Rob and Luke. Have you ever experimented with anything else on the snare, like newspaper?
I have, and A4, a piece of A4 paper is fantastic. You know, I think it was Stuart Bruce maybe who brought that down, who was on our show last week. He came down one day and said, just shove that on there. And I was like, what? And he's like, oh my God, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, and of course the tea towel I was going to bring from behind the bar over there and do the tea towel thing, but you know, it's obviously a Ringoism. But you know, again, instantly that can change your sound up to that Mick Fleetwood sort of mid-70s type sound as well. You know, Neil Young, Harvest, all that sort of stuff, that kind of sound. And I mean, I've also had people say, yeah, but it's the way you play it. Of course it is. It's the way you play it as well. So getting into referencing, listening to lots of music, lots of different genres, putting other genres with the ones you shouldn't be putting them with, but who says that's wrong? You know, mixing it all up and put it through a conduit and it comes out as you. And to be honest with you, obviously I worked on my technique as well, but it was the sound, you know, the way I was happy to mess with the drum sound and be pushed in that direction and not being a stick in the mud. This is how I play, this is my sound. So yeah, Matt, I do, and I know you do too. And I've got a little jingle thing I could put on there, which is Luke's. He lets me borrow. Thank you, Luke. Play with my hands, lots of different things, you know. So much you could do with just a drum, putting a little, some ball bearings, you know, like a chain on there as well, so it's got a little noise gate and stuff. Loads of things. I mean, as you know, Matt, we could just do 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours on the snare drum alone, you know. So thanks for tuning in, my man.
Nice.
Yes, very good. So any more questions? Any more? Or I can do them at a later date.
We have plenty of comments, but you can look at them after the fact. I'll show them all to you.
In your leisure.
Exactly.
Leisure.
I think that just leaves time to play us out with the Lynn drum.
Oh, yes, okay. So
I'm excited about.
I did threaten it earlier, and I should do it, shouldn't I?
I think you should.
I think I should. Let me just put this back into some sort of shape where it's not going to take my head off if it comes towards me. Well, thank you for tuning in, guys. As I say, please feel free to send more questions. And just via all my, you know, my website and my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just, you know, like my pages, befriend and ask me some questions. You know, do online lessons and all that stuff, and talking with the guys here about doing more of these into next year. Well, next year, because we're nearly there, aren't we?
Yeah, so definitely make sure that you're following the Facebook page. That's where we're putting out all the news on new masterclasses, as well as there's a whole bunch of like quick tips, little videos we've shot up there. They'll all be linked.
Cool.
And of course, the stream itself, if you've missed any of it, will be living there on the page.
Brilliant.
And I'll keep it pinned to the top for a couple of weeks, so it's nice and easy to find.
Luke is the man. Luke is the man in control of all that. He keeps the whole thing flowing beautifully, like clockwork, like a stream. Well, like I say, thanks ever so much, guys. Lovely. I'm just going to play you out with this lovely 1985 Lynn drum. Just messing about with some of the sounds. I never know what I'm going to do with this, but we're going to have some fun. So thanks very much, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. And also, thank you to all my sponsors as well, of course. Cympad, you know the people. You know who you are. So here we go.